So, talking about Mr. Oh goodness, Xing or Xing Tian, as otherwise pronounced, the newest god here in Smite. He is a guardian. He is very strange in terms of his kit, and we're going to talk about that. As far as his scale of 10 being broken like Nemesis release, 1 being awful like Ravana release, he's at like a 4, I would say, you know, where he doesn't need like a ton of stuff, but he needs some stuff switched. I think I would say like 7 is your balance point, right? 7's your balance point of like gods that kind of get played. 10 right now is like Outquang or whatever, you know, 1 being like Vamana. There you go. So he's at like a 4. His kit is good though, and that's what's going to be really good for us. Is his kit is strong, his numbers suck, and that's easy to change. It's not like his kit is inherently like hard to work with. Like kind of Ravana was kind of hard to work with because of how his kit worked, but I think we're going to be okay with this guy. So looking at our abilities, first problem is Smoldering Rage. So this is his passive. You get HP 5, 3 HP 5 up to 12 stacks, last 18 seconds, 36 HP 5. It sounds good, and it is good. The problem is it only applies when hitting an enemy with an ability, and that enemy has to be a god. It can't be minions, it can't be jungle camps. It only works on enemy gods. Because of that, the passive never really works. You have a passive that 80% of the time isn't doing anything passively, which doesn't make any sense. The easiest change to make to this is make it so it works on minions and makes it so it works on jungle camps. You might say, oh, well, then he's going to have 36 HP 5 all the time. That might be true. Is that too strong? Maybe. Easiest thing you can do there is reduce the max stacks. You want to let him hit minions and stuff, you reduce the max stacks to 9, you know, whatever the number may be. That's the easiest way to do it. Another way you could do it is you could make it a straight passive. Think like Kabrakan passive, where it's just on all the time, you do nothing. And you could just straight give him passive 20 HP 5, period. All the time he has it. That's another thing you could do. Makes it a little bit less interactive, but it's also the passive ability, so it's supposed to be passive. So that's another thought. Going into his first skill, this is probably his best skill right now in terms of damage. So looking at it right here, it does 60, 80, 120, 60, 80, 100, 120, 140, plus 20 damage each rank with 70% scaling. That's a big problem. We're going to talk about that in a second. It does a dot damage, 2.5% health per second. And then the duration of that bleed scales as you rank up the skill. That's why you rank up this skill first. Not only does it rank up the damage, it ranks up the dot duration, and it reduces the cooldown. Also, it reduces the basic attack damage of everything that it hits, including minions, including players, from auto attacks, and that also lasts during that duration. And it also scales up. This does not show, though, in the tooltip, and that's something that needs to be added to the tooltip. It needs to show up in here where it says reduces their basic attack damage. That needs to be down here showing that it scales. It's very unclear that this skill does this, and the only reason I know it does that is because I saw it in the patch notes where it was more clear. So the big problem overall, right, with this character that we're going to see starting on this skill is low base numbers, high scaling on a Guardian. And this is not how Guardians work. If you think about any other Guardian, think about Geb, think about Kumba, Ymir, Ares, Bacchus. All of these characters, high base damage, low scaling. And that's because they're meant to be played in the support role. When you have the high base damage, low scaling, it means you build full tank and you still do okay damage for the first 15 minutes of the game, and then you start to drop off as other people scale above you and get their damage going, and your damage drops off because you're not scaling because you were building tank. So the problem that this overall brings to the character is, in order to do damage, right, this is a damage-based Guardian. Think Ares, right? You want Ares where you're not really peeling for your team. You can initiate right? You can still initiate on Ares, but you're pretty much just bursting out damage is what you're doing. You're not really peeling. And this character doesn't do that because he doesn't do any damage for the start of the game because he doesn't have any base damage. Think about how hard Ares chains hit you at level 3. This character at level 3, he's going to tickle you and walk away. This character at level 20, if you built full mage, would do a lot of damage, but that doesn't help you because you can't get through the laning phase in any other lane outside of support. So, what do you do to this skill? You increase the base damage, you reduce the scaling. Take down the scaling back to 30-40% like typical Guardians are, and increase the damage started at 80 instead of 60, or started at 100. You know, Kepri's 2 hits for 120 at level 1. Keep it more consistent. Rank the skill all the way up to doing like 240 damage at max rank instead of 140. Keep the bleed on there. It'll work good, kind of like the Ares Flame Wave, passively, kind of like chains. Cool, it works. The cooldown, everything's good. That's all that needs to be changed on this skill. Increase base damage, reduce scaling, show me actually what the skill does in the tooltip. Cool. Moving on to Hook Slam. This is the skill that you rank up second right now on Xing 10. Outside, of course, of his ultimate, you want to get it every time. This is a cool skill. Once again, same problem. So if we look here, we've got 70% scaling, 25% on the first part of the skill, 45% on the second part of the skill, overall 70% scaling. But the base damage is 80 plus 190 at max rank. At the start, it's 25 plus 50. That's the most pitiful, grotesque, stupid damage number. 75 damage is what it does, and it's a 1 second root, okay? So, also the cooldown is 18 seconds. Okay, so a lot of things need to happen to this skill. 1, base damage goes up. No more 75 damage nonsense. Make it do like 100 damage flat at level 1 like a normal skill. Scale it all the way up to where this does like 140 and this does like 260 or whatever. So it does like 400 damage like a Geb rollout would do. Reduce the scaling, make it 15 and 25 scaling, so it's a normal 40% scaling. The root duration increase is fine. And make the cooldown scale as you rank it up, or at least drop the cooldown. The cooldown realistically should start at 15 seconds, just like its one skill, and reduce all the way down to 11 seconds. It also allows more viability in switching up the builds. You may want to rank up this skill instead of this skill first because of the cooldown and the increased damage. It allows more, creativity in the build, and it makes this skill actually more viable, particularly because you can get out before the slam damage after the axe damage. This skill is a knock-up and then basically a slam down with the root, and you can avoid the slam down by using a getaway skill after the knock-up. There really needs to be increase, like I said, increase damage, reduce the scaling, cooldown reduced / also reduced as you level it up. Needs to be done. Otherwise, the skill's way too long. Cooldowns in general on this character need to be reduced. As far as the jump goes, not a huge problem with this skill. It works fine. You're only getting it pretty much one level up. You're ranking it up last. Yeah, it gives protections. Only gives them for 3 seconds. Only does it for yourself. It's basically a typical jump skill, but like think Nemesis Dash, right? It feels a little bit weird to have this skill on a Guardian. Not that it's not a good skill. The skill itself is fine. It just feels out of place on a Guardian. I would rather see a regular jump, honestly, on a Guardian. I'd rather have like a Hades dash. I'd rather have a Bacchus jump, just a regular full distance jump, because as a Guardian, what you're trying to do, right, is you're trying to initiate. And initiating is not nearly as effective when you do a half jump into a half jump, because it gives the enemy team a whole lot more time to prepare for you coming in when they can see you doing your initial jump, so they know you're going to do your next jump to come in, so they spread out and there goes your team fight. Much better would just be take away the double jump on this skill, make it one regular jump, doesn't have to be anything crazy, so you just jump in and then you can use your ultimate like every other character does. Pretty normal, right? Makes a lot more sense that way as a Guardian. His ultimate is his crazy redeeming factor. His ultimate is very strong. It's a very tiny radius. It can be hard to hit. It can be beads out of. It's good at forcing beads, but not nearly as good as Ares' ultimate is, because Ares' ultimate is like 3 times the distance as this skill. I don't think the distance needs to be increased a crazy amount on this skill. The damage is fine on this skill. So for those that don't know, this damage is done 3 times. So you go 1, 2, 3. So this actually is 150 damage base up to 450, which is okay. The scaling on it is kind of whatever. It doesn't matter that much. It matters because it's 150% scaling on this in terms of that, but like you can't build this character magical damage because you're going to die because he's only viable in the support role. Now, if you keep this at 50% scaling on his ultimate and you change these skills, you make this base damage higher, you make this base damage higher, right? And you reduce the scaling on these skills, but keep the scaling here, what you're going to see, I think, is this character played in the solo lane. He'll be able to clear with his 1-2, right? He'll be able to go into team fights, do a ton of damage like a Hi-Rez with his ultimate, and be very strong. Do you want to see him in the solo lane compared to the Guardian role? I'm not sure. Maybe you reduce the scaling on this like you did on everything else. Bring this down to 30%, so it's 90% scaling instead of 150% scaling. That could be another way to go about that as well. As far as the cooldown, I think the cooldown should probably be reduced a little bit on this skill starting. Maybe have it start at 90 and go down to 70 or 75. It seems like it starts off a little bit high. You really need to build cooldown on this character, which kind of seems a little bit counterintuitive in that supporty type role. But I think with the reduced cooldowns to 11 seconds, if you reduce this down to 11 seconds with the cooldowns, blah, 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 you bring this in, you have a little bit less cooldown, you build a cooldown on the character, you get your skills up more active, you got a little bit more base damage. I think you're looking at a character that could be an aggressive support. Because at the end of the day, when you look at his kit, he is not a typical peel support, right? This is not a Geb. This is not a Sylvanas. He doesn't bring any healing to the table. He does bring initiation from the ultimate, although he has to do it with blink because he can't do it with his jump because his jump is not good for initiation. He brings good CC with the hook slam. He brings pretty good damage with the Furious Roar. Not lane clear right now, but pretty okay damage because of the percentage bleed. But you're looking, this is an Ares. I'm going to kill you before you kill me. I'm going to kill you right there before you kill me. The problem is right now, he's not killing anybody because he doesn't have any base damage. So I like where his kit's going. I like what it's oriented at. It just needs to be honed in on the damage charts to make sure that he's fulfilling that niche role of damage guardian and not trying to make him into this end game scaling mage like a Hi-Rez, but Hi-Rez can full clear a wave at level 3 because he has base damage on top of that, and this character has no base damage. But I think if those changes are made, that this god will actually be very fun. I think he could be viable in the support and solo lane with those changes. You're going to see him doing a lot of damage, you know, using a lot of skills, kind of like warrior-esque guardian type combination there. And I think you're going to see him played possibly even competitively because of the utility that he brings. But right now, I wouldn't pick this character outside of a casual game. So that's kind of that. That's the new god. That's him. We did it. That's our how to balance. I think we should go back